Welcome to our SEAM studio here in the heart of the Free State in Bloemfontein. This channel serves to bring you only the best in aviation safety. Join me now as we cross over to one of our aviation experts, Charlie Marais.
Well, welcome everybody to the second presentation in a series of 5 about stalling speed. And this time, we'll look at the speeds that you have. How are we going to apply that inside the circuit? Very firstly, we're going to have a look at how to determine VREF. And you can immediately say to me, but what is VREF? Well, if you look at a runway and you've done your circuit and you come in on final approach, the speed that you want over the threshold, that is called VREF. Right, and the rest of the circuit is going to be adapted according to the VREF. But where does VREF start? Well, first of all, we can see from here that I read it off as plus minus 51 knots, you will get your VSO, and that is the stalling speed, as you may recall, in the landing configuration. In other words, undercarriage is down and the amount of flap that you use is already been selected. Right. So what you do is you take the 51 knots, which is there, and then you times it by 1.3, and that will give you 66.3 knots. Normally, it's rounded up, if you can see. Now, yes, you can round it up to 67 knots, but 67 knots may be difficult to read of the airspeed indicator. So what you're going to do is 70. 70 is a good number, and probably use 70 at this stage. But next we've got to have a look at the VS. Now remember, this at the bottom here was the stalling speed in landing configuration, and this is the clean stalling speed that we've got here at the bottom of the green arc. So it could be said, look, if you want to do a flapless approach, what am I going to do now? Well, you can always times it by 1.3 again. You'll probably then get 75.4 knots, and 75 knots will be very close. So normally what you find is that there's about 5 knots difference. Some people feel it's 5 knots for every flap setting. Well, if there's 4 flap settings, it means it's 20 knots. Maybe I don't think so, because we normally take 5, and that's adequately for the smaller aircraft that we fly. Now, if we have a look at the VFE, remember here, and you can see here nicely that's 95 knots, maximum speed for flap selection or flap extension. Now, it is true that in some aircraft you can extend the first notch of flaps with the undercarriage, so when your maximum speed for undercarriage selection could also be the first flap. Not in this case. In our case, remember, we are going to honor the white line in whatever we do. Now, you've got to be able to adjust the VREF from now and then, because if you get maybe there's gusts, there's turbulence, there's wind shear. When you have got all these challenges, then actually want to increase the VREF a little bit. There are 2 ways to look at this, and I'll give my opinion on that. However, as you can see, there are 2. Well, the first one says you take 1/3 of the average wind or the gust velocity, whichever is the highest, and you limit that to a maximum of 15 knots. In other words, if you've got a headwind of X and you've got a gust of X, and you add the 2 up and it comes to 17 knots, you're going to be limited to 15 knots. And that's an increase on your normal approach speed. All right. The other way is to take half the steady wind component plus, and that's now where the difference. It was not or, it's plus the entire gust. And then they talk about normally maximum of 20 knots. 20 knots, my opinion is that if the wind is so strong and so bad, yeah, you can put 20 knots in. I'm not sure if that will still be in the conditions of your aircraft. However, let's see from a practical point what happens. Practical usage, runway, let's say it is runway 01 is in use. The wind is 010, in other words, the total headwind. And it's 15 knots, gusting 25. So the gust is 10 knots. So according to the first one, it says 1/3 of the velocity, which is 5. And then it says or, the gust, which is 10. So in this case, we have to take 10. So we'll then add 10 knots to the VREF. Let's do the other one, and you see how, you know, it's quite different. Half the steady wind speed, there we've got 75 knots. And then they say the entire gust is 10. So all of a sudden we're looking at 17.5. And now you are looking at the difference between 10 knots and 17.5. That's a difficult one. Again, remember they said this one is to a maximum of 20. My personal opinion, 50 knots is okay. When you fly the bigger stuff, you know, it obviously comes important that you do it according to the handling. But most of us, if we've got a little bit of gusty conditions, I suggest that we actually use, I like that one, all right. But if you want to add 15 knots, add 15 knots. It's not going. Just remember your hold-off was going to be longer, all right? And therefore your landing run, if you are going to not stall, but land above the stalling speed, that'll be after landing run will always be longer. Just compensate for that, and that is no problem. So now we get to the point where, or the part where we've got to start using the figures that we've got. Now, at this stage, we looked at the VREF. If you can remember, we worked it out at 70 knots. Okay, that is what we want here. There's the runway. We're flying around the circuit this way, crosswind, downwind, base leg. This is the final approach. And there you've got the wind indication. Good. Now, it's not a big deal. All you have to do is to take your VREF and you add 15. So if this is 70, that is going to be 85. Then this is going to be 80. This is going to be 75. And VREF is 70. So that's how you work out what speeds am I going to use. All right. So we went out, we got the VSO, we times it by 1.3, we rounded it up, look at the nice figure to read it out on, and then we join and we say, okay, for this aircraft, we're going to join at a specific speed. Obviously, this 85 knots must be inside the limit for flap selection. Otherwise, it will have to be less. So just be careful that you see. In our case, 85 is where we can still select it. So it pretty much works out. It pretty much is okay. I brought some extra stuff with here. And we've now done the circuit. We worked out the VSO, then we worked out the VREF, then we plus 15 and plus 10 and plus 5, and we've got the VREF. And then we land. But if we go around, and remember this is where the accidents normally, or many of the accidents happen with a hold-off, where we balloon. There's crazy stuff that we can do there. But there's one figure that we must understand. The minimum unstick speed, and this is not the one that I'm using at this moment in time, because this is for normal operation. What you do is that there's a V2 or V-rotate, and that's when you rotate off the ground and you actually climb away. In this case, this is the speed. Then the aircraft must accelerate to, let's say, Vy, which is the best rate of climb. Now, just note here, Vx is, you know, if it's required. Or normally in a touch and go, we don't do a best angle of climb, unless it's obviously very needed. Best angle of climb is one of those things that we need. If you can fly in short strips, you better be able to apply Vx as well. Right, so just to sum up this part here, this is where most of the trouble lies, in this sector. Because in this sector, if you are too low on your takeoff speed, all right, And if your nose attitude is too high, and remember, this is where it's very important. Once you go around, open up the throttle, remember, the aircraft was trimmed for the landing. It means it would have been trimmed rearwards for quite a bit. So now if you fool, there's going to be a serious pitch up moment, and you will have to overtake those forces. If your attitude is, attention is now split from where it's required, you look inside, you're going to see the nose is too high, speed is too low, and you're already in trouble. This is not the place to get into trouble. All right. And in the next series, we're going to have a look at that one. So it's been a short one, this one. Conclusion. See, up to now, we've seen the basic stalling speed. We started using the landing configuration. In other words, we've got VSO. From that, we multiplied it by 1, 2, 3, and rounded it up to the best that we can use, and that became our V reference. We then took the V reference and we just simply add 15, and that was the downwind speed. Base leg 10 knots less, final rev plus 5, in other words, and then rev is when you go over the threshold. Slightly before that, plus minus over that, but that's the speed that you want there. If you are slightly below V rev, no, it's going to fall out of the sky. Remember, there is a 1.3 factor that was built in. Do we always want to approach? Well, if you need to do a short landing and you need to approach more flap, more power, and a flatter high power approach, but that is for another day. All right, so we added the minimum takeoff speed, V2, climb away speed, Vx, and Vy. This is something that you need to go and practice. Remember, speed equals life, especially in that part after the takeoff where you accelerate. If you over-rotate, you're in trouble. If you under-rotate, you're not in trouble. You're just going to quickly gain some speed, and then you can make it better. But if you've over-rotated, and in the next presentation, we're going to specifically look at that one. Right, so that's then the end of the second delivery. Take care. Enjoy.
We hope you enjoyed that aviation snippet with Charlie Marais. Please make sure to visit our website www.aviationauditing.co.za. Follow us on both Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel under Seams Studio.